Welcome back to the Hogsty, where we're going to give you the latest happenings in the world of the Redskins and the NFL. U.S. Interior Secretary Sally Jewell told D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser that any attempt to move the Redskins back to D.C. would be blocked by the Obama administration unless the team changed its name. I don't know about you guys, but I'll choose who to vote for in 2016 based solely on who is most Redskin-friendly. Meanwhile, Redskins free safety Duke Iannaco took to Twitter to complain about the structure of NFL contracts in the context of the insane spending going on in the NBA. We'll take a look at what he said and compare NFL contracts to those of the other major sports. In other news, Chris Russell is out at ESPN 980 after 5 years as a beat reporter. The Hogsty would just like to formally announce to ESPN that we are both available and better than the man cave. The supplemental draft will be July 9th, and the NFL announced on Thursday the names of the 7 eligible players, so we'll take a look at them. And also on Thursday, 4 NFL player suspensions were announced in Antonio Gates, Rolando McClain, Sheldon Richardson, and Datone Jones of the Packers. All that, plus we'll take a look at the inside linebacker position. Stay tuned for the Hogsty.
It's the Hogsty.
All right, welcome back to the Hogsty. Boy, are we glad to have you. I am joined here today by Alex Zeese.
Hello again.
Kelly Worrell.
Happy 4th of July, everybody.
And Steve Thomas.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Awesome, guys. We are excited. We've got some headlines to go over first. Let's chat a little bit about this latest stuff going on with the Redskins name change and a possible move back to D.C. So, Muriel Bowser, who has wish-washed, I feel like, 1,000,000 times on her position on the Redskins name change, is trying
Not
to get
just the name change.
Right. Is trying to get the team to come back to D.C., but apparently, according to Interior Secretary Sally Jewell, that would be blocked by the Obama administration. Do we have thoughts on this, guys?
I have some thoughts, and the first and most important thought is that by the time the Redskins are ready to build a stadium or even get approval to build a stadium, the Obama administration will not be in office. So anything that this current Interior Secretary says is somewhat irrelevant. What is far more important is what the next administration, whoever it is, thinks about it. That's my
Trump 2016.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. What's also not going to happen, I know we don't want to get into politics or anything, but I don't see the next administration being a conservative one. It just doesn't seem to be shaping up that. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, so we'll flip a coin on that. But I do think that, if it ends up being another Democratic president, that we're going to be facing the same thing for at least another 4 years. If it's a conservative president, maybe they don't care as much. And then it's down to who the mayor is and what they're willing to do. But if it comes down to a political thing, I think eventually the Redskins are going to have to change their name if they want to get back into D.C.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, like you said, I think it's all going to depend on D.C. leadership. I guess it's sort of interesting that the president can kind of control this, being that D.C., I guess, is a federal city, and I guess that gives him, gives them jurisdiction over controlling these things. But I just wanted to say, too, about Bowser specifically, her stance on this has changed 1,000 times. She was so against the Redskins names when she was running for office. She got it, and then suddenly it was all about cutting a deal. I find that so interesting.
Well,
Bowser's that kind of politician. She was an opportunist, and that's how she got in. She kind of rode the coattails of administration that was facing corruption charges. So she really, got in easy. She, probably didn't want to make waves anyway. I didn't really vote for her, just candidly, but,
Right.
The ironic thing is the guy I would have voted for in the Democratic Party is actually a closeted Cowboys fan. I won't say who that is, but he is.
Yeah, we're not voting for
That's
them.
not good.
Well, he's not from here.
First of all, as to what Kelly said, if it's a conservative president, hopefully they'll be a little bit more amenable to the Redskins name. Certainly a liberal president, if it happens, probably won't.
Right.
But, recall when we talked about this before, I told you guys and was promptly shouted down that I think it's unlikely that there's going to be a new stadium in D.C. simply because there's so many issues involved.
Right.
Because the federal government is involved and there's land use issues and all sorts of other stuff. I think it's a lot easier process for the team to build a stadium in Virginia where, A, they don't have to deal with the name change stuff, because Virginia doesn't seem to care. And B, Virginia's just paying, has been, courting the Redskins for years now.
Well,
I just think it sounds good, and I get what your point is, Alex, how it'd be great to have a stadium in D.C. I think it's unlikely, and the name change issue makes it even more unlikely.
Well, I think there's a couple of things at play here. First, the land deal expires in 22 years. That's what the article said. So not only are we not talking about the next administration, we could be talking potentially 5 presidents from now.
And Alex, just to be clear, when you mentioned the fact that the land use agreement goes for another 20 years, that is referring to the RFK Stadium site, not FedEx Field. FedEx Field's lease goes to 2026. So that issue will have to be resolved long before the RFK Stadium site lease is resolved. The federal government owns the site, and it leases the land to the District of Columbia. So that is what's going on with the RFK Stadium site.
As a Washingtonian, I always get really agitated anytime the federal government really says, nope, you can't do that.
Right.
We're seeing it with other political issues as well. Historically, the government's kind of let D.C. do its own thing, even though they have the right to interfere. But it seems like lately, with how polarized our federal government is, playing games with the people of Washington, D.C. as a pawn has become really in vogue with both parties of late. And that's just a horrible thing to deal with as a Washingtonian.
Yeah.
Bowser, useless. But one thing to keep in mind about Virginia also very likely is going to have another governor before any deals get signed as well. So while McAuliffe might be very pro-Redskins, the next guy probably won't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. How can you possibly say he probably won't? We don't know who the next governor of Virginia is.
Just going based on how it seems like politics is going when it comes to this name. You have Republicans coming out against the name. You have a lot of things going on.
Money talks, and a stadium in Virginia means money for Virginia.
Well, this is what it comes down to for me, right? So the thing of it is, Dan Snyder's very good at making money, and this is what he does, right? He cuts deals that are advantageous to him, to his business, to his bottom line, to his accountant. And I know that he's a Redskins fan. I'm sure he would love to see the team in D.C. But at the end of the day, if it's going to cost him, a ton more money and a bunch of legal headaches and loopholes, and it's not in his control to do that, I think that he's going to end up, either re-upping in Maryland or going to Virginia, because that's, Virginia has been very generous in terms of, the whole practice facility thing. Virginia's courting pretty hard, and they're going to make it. I think Virginia, out of the 3, is the the group that's going to make it the financially most viable for him to do that. And I just think that his natural proclivities are going to drive him toward the money, and he's going to end up in Virginia.
The other component to all this is that the name change lawsuit has not been is not over with yet. If the team loses the trademark for real, and it goes all the way through the appellate court system, I can't see how the National Football League is going to let the Redskins continue with the Redskins name when the trademark isn't protected.
Yeah, no matter what Dan Snyder says, saying that he wants to keep it. I agree with you.
That's
other
right.
30 teams will pressure him.
Right. Because it's just too much money at stake, and so if that happens, God help us. Let's hope it doesn't. The stadium thing isn't going to be an issue. And so you've got another couple years before that's going to work itself out. And so I suspect that, when they're ready for real to play in a stadium, and say 4 or 5 years from now is when it gets serious, the whole thing will probably be worked out in terms of the name.
I want to go on record here and say that I think, and you can, we'll pull a red skirt out and book it if you want to. I think that the name is going to change before they end up in a new stadium.
Yeah, you might not be wrong about that.
I think numbers-wise, it's probably in your favor, just how many years are left and all that stuff.
I've been saying for a long time, for those of you who know me on the blog, I've been saying pretty much since the day I got here, whatever it is, 4 or 5 years ago, it's just been a while. The name is going to change. There's no real getting around that. There's a wave of political correctness in this country that upsets a lot of people, but it's there. and it's a real thing, and it's happening, and society is changing, and all of these things, and it's just the name Redskins just isn't going to fit in society the way the society is going. It's going to end up changing.
Yeah, I think, Kelly, you're probably right in that the name is going to change. Now, whether or not I think it should change or this whole debate about it is reasonable, I don't know. But I think you're right that it will. I also think that if returning to DC hinged on changing the name, man, that would be such a tough decision for me to make. I don't know.
I don't think the team cares if they're in DC or not, personally.
But you know what? I care because I hate that they're the only DC pro team that doesn't play in DC. I hate that.
Yep.
You might care, but the team doesn't care because financially it doesn't really matter.
Not.
What matters is whether Maryland, DC, or Virginia is going to give the team the best financial deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, listen, it's very rare that a team owns their own stadium, and it's owns the land that the stadium sits on, very rare. The odds of that happening again are probably not good.
Right.
It's probably going to be owned by a government, and it's going to be leased back to the Redskins. And if that happens, it's going to be a money thing, period, no matter what any of us think.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's all it's going to be.
No.
Well, I think you're right about that. If that's the case, then it really would make the most sense for them to just, take up some of the parking lot space where FedEx is right now and just build again.
Probably.
That way they have the land and, they're already there.
It's certainly possible. Of course, the problem with that is, the team wouldn't have a place to play for a year while the stadium's being built.
They could play at University of Maryland Stadium for a year.
Yeah, true.
Well, let's save some of this for our very special name change episode, which we're going to do at a TBD date. But we all
An
have tons of
appropriate
thoughts on it.
time.
Yeah. So, anyways, let's move on today. Let's talk about Ian Akko's comments because I thought they were actually pretty cool. So, for those of you that didn't catch them, he took to Twitter to complain about, and this is all in the context again of the NBA spending frenzy that has occurred recently. And I think the numbers were the NBA got together and they agreed on principle to pay like $1.5 billion in salary to players in the NBA. That's huge, big money. So Ian Akko heard all of this, and he also was just talking generally about the structure of NBA contracts and just how much bigger they are than NFL contracts and how much guaranteed they are compared to NFL contracts. I was reading some of the stats, and it just is kind of mind-blowing. Do you guys have any thoughts on this? Did you see his tweets?
I haven't seen his tweets, but I gotta agree with him. It's the NBA players. People are talking about these deals and they're six-figure deals. 9-figure. I don't even have lost track of how many damn figures it is. They're very, very large deals. And NBA players aren't going through anything near what NFL players are going through in terms of concussions, in terms of just beat up, bruising, physical, life-changing activities that are for an NFL player. You've got guys retiring now from the NFL at very young ages when when you wouldn't expect them to. You'd expect them to go ahead and they've been playing their whole lives to try to get up to the NFL level. They want to be, Hall of Fame. This is their dream, and they're giving up on it early because they don't think that it's worth it, the amount of damage that their bodies are taking. And so if you see the kind of salaries that are going on in the NBA.
Insane.
They're insane salaries, but you would think that just by nature of how it impacts your entire life, that NFL players would make more money. And I know that,
and I think the same would go for baseball as well.
But that you'd think so.
That's just a wonderful, nice, heartfelt thought, but it's business, okay?
Absolutely.
It's all it is. It's business, period. And the simple fact of the matter is that the NFL owners have negotiated against the NFL Players Union much better than the unions for the other major sports franchises. It's as simple as that, okay? The NFL owners have more clout, more power, more influence, and more leverage than do the players, than do the owners of the NBA and the NFL. It's as simple as that. I get Duke's frustration, because if it was a perfect world, yeah, he's right. They're risking more of themselves for football. The NFL's making a lot more money, like twice as much money as the NBA.
Right.
And so if everything was fair, yeah, the NFL players would make more. But it's not fair. It's business, and he only has his union to blame, and that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say basically the same thing. Obviously, this is all a result of the respective CBAs that were agreed to, but just so you guys know the specific numbers, the average NBA salary is about $5 million. The average NFL salary is about $2 million. So just like Kelly was saying, if you talk about the damage to your body and what you're risking, it's just insane that NBA salaries on average are over twice as much as NFL salaries. I wanted to also just throw this out. So baseball, 3.82 is the average. Right. Hockey, 2.5. So it's still $500,000 more than the average NFL salary. I also just wanted to point out in terms of baseball contracts, I forget the numbers, but that Max Scherzer deal,
$200 million for 5 or 6 years or something like that.
That is staggering. That's baseball. I mean, crazy numbers.
Keep in mind, he will probably get another contract after that before he retires.
I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah. Part of this, it's not just about the crazy numbers we're talking about. You got to remember, a football team has a lot more players than most baseball
53.
teams.
That's very true.
50. So that's double a baseball team, which is 25-man rosters.
And it's like 3 times as much as a basketball team, too, I think.
Yeah, I think basketball teams max out at, 12 people on most teams?
You're dressing 12.
15.
Yeah, you're dressing 12. You can go up to 15.
They can put up to 15 on the roster.
Right. So, still, that could account for some of it, but not everything. I think what it really comes down to, it's not just – if the players want more guaranteed money, I think they need to really look at revamping how how the salary cap's done. With dead money that comes after you cut a guy and all that stuff. If the NFL players want more money, they need to give the owners leeway to release guys without there being weird repercussions on the rest of the roster.
Well, and this is the thing, right? So we're getting into the sort of the discussions of the CBA, which is something that Steve knows very well, and the rest of us know sort of tangentially, I assume, since I don't have the patience to read through the whole thing, but Steve does. But the way that I see it is, you have to blame the NFLPA a little bit, but you know that those guys are fighting for every dime that they can get, and the NFL is fighting to not give them every dime that they can get. The NFL is trying to pay these guys basically as little as they can, while the NFLPA is trying to make sure that these guys are taken care of as best as they can. And so, at some point, you have to look at the NFL, as an ownership group and say, okay, well, the NFL does have the power to change this and fix this and pay these guys more. They're not getting paid less because the NFLPA wants them to get paid less. They're getting paid less because the NFL is putting their legal team and all their expertise on keeping that down. And it seems that the NFL sort of does this right. They're fighting against having to pay people out for concussions. They're fighting against they're a business and they're trying to, like every business, they're trying to play to the bottom line as opposed to necessarily trying to do what is best for their employees. And that's they have it in their power to change that.
Yeah, the NFL doesn't care what's best for the employees. The ownership cares about profit margin, and the ownership cares about growing the value of the business.
Right, but they shouldn't.
That's it.
They should care about the people who are working for them.
No, they shouldn't. It's business. Who cares? It's business. The point of the business is to make money, and that's it. And the NFL owners are doing that much better than the other leagues. And the other thing here is that NBA players have a little bit more leeway because they can go play overseas. There's no other football league anywhere to go for football players to go play. They're just done.
Not for a comparable salary. No.
Like, Stephon Marbury, for example, is playing in China somewhere in some Chinese league, and he was the MVP of the league over there. This past couple years. But it's a business, and I think if I was an owner, I'd do the exact same thing. You have a union, you'll go negotiate, and I want to make money, and that's it. That's the way it
and
should
that's
be.
where
That's the way it is.
you and I are going to differ on that, because if I own a business, my number one thing is to make sure that the people who are working for me are taken care of, and it's a philosophical difference, right? There is no law that says that if you own a business, you have to put your margins ahead of the welfare of the people who work for you. I realize that a lot of people think that way. I realize that that's capitalism, and that's what we teach people here in America, is that, as a business owner, your job is to squeeze every penny you can out of wherever you can get it. But that's not a law. It's not a law of economics. It's not a law of the United States of America. You can do the right thing toward your employees, even if it means that you're making a little less bank at the end of the day. These owners are not hurting for money for the most part.
Neither are the players.
Well, some of the players are. Not all of the players, but the players who have a shortened career due to injury, who, they're going to make a little bit of money for a little while. But the NFL is working to reduce that amount of money as much as they can. They don't want to help the players, and that is something within their control. There is no rule that says you have to make as much money as you can at the cost of the health of your players.
I mean, this is not a charity here. This is business.
It is
and
business.
The owners have every right to make money, and that's why there's a players' union.
Technically, it's still a nonprofit, so it is technically
no. The NFL, the league is a nonprofit. All
teams
of the
are not.
teams are for-profit corporations,
Yeah.
and all of the NFL's entities are for-profit entities too. It's just the league office that is.
We just disagree on that. I think at a fundamental level. I'm a humanitarian. I think that you put the people first and the money second.
The only thing that I was going to say is there could be an intersection of those two things, because there's a point at which not taking care of your players is bad business. And we obviously saw an unprecedented number of players retire early this past offseason. Clearly the deals they were getting weren't good enough to risk, the damage that was being done to their body. So I think Kelly has a point in that. Of course it's about business, but again, at some point, not taking care of your people is bad business, and you lose.
Well, and you have to remember, it's a PR. The NFL is first and foremost entertainment, and entertainment's all about PR. If you start looking like you're treating your employees poorly, that's going to hurt the bottom line in the long run.
Right.
Yeah, but you know what? Here's the thing. Here's the way I think society at large views this. They see the owners as a bunch of rich billionaires who've made it because, for the most part, they've been good at business. They have a special level of intellect or something. The public can kind of excuse billionaires for a lot of their conduct, but I think the public sees the players as just a bunch of average guys who are being greedy. I think that's the way the public sees it, because if you notice during the CBA negotiations, most of the prevailing public opinion was that the players were just being greedy. And I think it's the reason is because the public sees these guys as just a bunch of average kids, and there may be a racial component to it too, quite honestly. But I think the public will give billionaires a little bit of leeway that they won't give average people.
I think that that's true for some of the country. I think that a lot of the country doesn't like billionaires right now. We saw a huge groundswell of public thought during the Occupy thing, the 1% thing. There's a lot of talk.
Occupy thing was a total waste of time.
That's your opinion from your perspective, and I wouldn't expect any different statement from you. But we're on opposite sides of the fence on that, and but there is a large and growing number of people who are dissatisfied. I don't think that we give billionaires a pass the way that we did before. They're somehow naturally superior to the rest of us, and therefore, are deserve to make more money than everybody else. And
especially billionaires like Mayor up there in New York, who, let's face it, he didn't do a thing to earn his money.
A whole bunch of these guys inherited the team from their fathers, who did work very hard and did have business acumen and did these things. And and these guys grew up, rich kids who inherited something very big. And they learned how to operate it, but they learned how to operate it from a top down. Let's keep as much money as we can perspective. And I don't think, Steve, that as much of the country, gives those guys a pass and thinks that it's the folks at the bottom who are being greedy as you might think.
Well, I think the media coverage and public opinion during the collective bargaining agreements or the collective bargaining sessions say otherwise.
Well, you're probably. I mean,
Quite honestly.
for you and me and Sean and Alex and Robbie and everybody else down here at the the plebiscite level, yeah, all of these people are super rich, right? You've got players making millions of dollars to play football. You've got owners making billions of dollars to help people play football.
Right.
All of these numbers are astronomical to the average Joe, and so
When you're making $100,000 to be on the practice squad,
right? We definitely do see the players as being greedy because they're making tons of money doing something we'd all just love to do instead of having to go to the job, right? But but then the greed coming from the owner's side is a whole sort of another level of greed. These are people who are not worried about their futures. They're not worried about getting their mom a house. They're not worried about the kinds of things that the athletes, many of whom grew up without a lot of money, they're not thinking about those kinds of life problems. They're just thinking about how can I make my pile a bigger pile.
Yeah, and they're not at risk of serious bodily injury either.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's not about that. It's about business. It is business, and everybody wants to make more money. The Players Association wants to make more money. The NFL owners want to make more money, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, Steve, I would like your opinion on this too, though. I'm not sure if this is still the case this year, but a couple years ago, almost all basketball teams, it seemed, were losing money, but they were still giving huge payouts to the players when they were averaging. I mean, that's bad business,
Well, they didn't really have much of a choice, did they?
That or Europe.
I mean, the CBA agreements just aren't always necessarily good for everybody. I mean,
well, listen, the reason the NBA and the Major League Baseball make a lot less money than the NFL is the television contracts.
Yeah.
Okay,
Though baseball's
the NFL has
recovered
it has, but the NFL has a massively huge TV contract. The NBA has a TV contract, and with TNT and ESPN and ABC for the finals, but it is nothing like what the NFL has. And so there's a lot more money coming into the NFL than those other two leagues. And you heard a lot of talk last baseball offseason about whether or not Major League Baseball had become a regional sport, and part of it is that all of the TV is regional and local coverage.
Right.
So there's just not as much money out there.
Well, teams are making pretty good money on their regional contracts unless they're named the Nationals and
but it's
and
not
the Orioles control
like
their
the
TV
NFL's
rights
making.
somehow. But
It's not billions like the NFL's making, though. There were baseball teams that were legitimately in the red on an annual basis. There's not any NFL teams that are in the red. If you remember from the 2011 CBA negotiations, the NFL had put up a major fight about releasing their financials to the
I
players.
remember.
Well, and the reason is that they had doctored their financials to make it appear as though they were not making as much money as
they were claiming that a few small teams were actually not losing
and
money.
what the NFL owners have consistently ignored is the fact that their franchise values have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And so no matter how far in the red they ever get, which they won't, they're going to make a fortune on the sale of the
Well,
team.
but that's okay, right?
That goes into
it's
value.
business.
Of course it is.
And therefore,
absolutely,
it's
capitalism.
It doesn't matter whether you're breaking rules or not disclosing information
breaking
to your
any rules.
employees or...
They're not breaking any rules. It's a business negotiation, Kelly.
Well,
what rule did they break?
Well, what they're breaking the trust with the players, right? So if you're not disclosing to the players what your finances are because you're trying to appear like you're not making as much money as you're actually making, that's just ethically wrong, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's just a business. It's a business negotiation.
Yeah, but you can't just say there's money at the end of it and therefore it's okay to do. Because
yes,
you
can.
can't.
If they're not breaking a law and they're not breaking a rule,
there's
no problem with it.
There's ethical
they're not
problems
breaking any laws.
with okay, let's say I run a small business. I'm running a donut shop, and I'm telling my employees, I'm sorry, I can't pay you more than minimum wage because I'm not making any money myself. But really, I'm actually making billions of dollars myself. But I'm not showing that to my employees because then they're going to feel like, hey, we're the guys that are actually making this money for you. Therefore, don't we deserve some of it? And for me to say, no, you don't is one thing. For me to say no, you don't because I'm also broke that's immoral and is wrong, isn't it?
They didn't say that. That's not what the NFL said
You
at all.
just said that
the
they
NFL
were not disclosing the numbers to the players because
they didn't ever say they were broke.
no, but
they didn't say they were broke.
But they wanted to hide how much money they were making, didn't they?
They were open and honest about the fact that they wanted to increase their annual revenue. What they did not want, but I look at it as it was in context of a major business negotiation.
That doesn't make it okay. You can't just say it was business,
and
therefore ethics don't apply.
There was no ethical problem, though. It's just a business. It's just a business negotiation. You and I just totally disagree.
We do.
We have a different worldview on this.
We do.
We could talk about this forever.
We have a different take.
I don't know if the audience want to hear it
Fundamental
forever.
different opinion. But I mean,
right,
Kelly, I'm closer to the way you feel. I see what you're saying, Steve, but to bring it back a little bit to Iannaco before we get too far off track, I just want to say, so part of what he was talking about too was the difference between guaranteed contract numbers and not. So the obvious truth being that NFL contracts generally are not guaranteed. A huge percentage of them are, based on production,
partially guaranteed
or whatever.
Well, they're partially guaranteed.
Not the case with NBA contracts, which are largely always guaranteed.
Right.
That is an interesting difference there, and I think I forget what exactly his wording was, but his tweet was saying every player should make at least $1 million guaranteed. I don't disagree with that. I think that's fair.
He kind of pulled the number out of thin air. I mean, it's like I've been saying, it's just simply a matter of the NFLPA has not done as good a job as the NBA Players Association.
Well, I think that we all agree on there. The NFLPA did
a
very poor job negotiating in the end, and they have.
It goes back to Gene Upshaw.
Yeah, it goes
the days
back
of Gene Upshaw
decades.
and Pete Rozelle. Yeah, because Gene Upshaw was Pete Rozelle's best buddy back in the 70s and early 80s. And the NFL Players Association agreed to a lot of things back then that they're never going to get back.
It certainly did seem at the time.
The first starting with the salary cap, quite honestly.
I mean, we know why it's that way, Steve, but I think we're just commenting on how strange it is when you look at it in the context of the paychecks other athletes are getting in other sports.
Right.
Obviously, we know it's the CBA wasn't negotiated well by the players, but
I just don't have a problem with it that you guys do. It's just a business negotiation. And
yeah, but I mean, not all business is good business. I think that's our only point. Is some business seems like it's less ethical than other business. I mean, it's legal, but it's just weird to think that NBA rookies are making so much more money than NFL rookies. 10-year vets in the NBA are making more money than 10-year vets in the NFL, when way more dangerous to play in the NFL and there's way more money.
Let me throw a hypothetical situation out here. So we all followed the negotiations while they were happening with the latest CBA, and I think that all of us can agree that at the end of it, it came out pretty short stick for the players,
yes.
and that the owners came out definitely with the advantage out of this latest agreement that they came to. Would it be good business if the NFL had found a back channel, backdoor way to get the Players Association to agree to lesser terms, whether that's sliding something on the side to the folks who were negotiating on their end, whether it was some other kind of not necessarily super illegal but slightly shady thing. And when it comes down to business negotiations, if you can find a technically by the letter of the law legal way to give yourself an advantage that ends up hurting the players in the long run, because I think we can all look and see, and I agree with Iannaco that the players have been hurt in the long run by this agreement. But the NFL found a way to get to that agreement when, by all rights, they probably shouldn't have. Is it good business for them to have done that, or is it just greed?
Right. I'm more inclined to say that that's a greedy move. But I also...
What's wrong with that, though?
I also...
What's wrong with being greedy?
Well, it's one of the sins, isn't it?
Right. It is one of the cardinal sins.
But it's just a free market system,
Yeah, I mean... Steve, you're totally right. But the free market doesn't always produce great situations for society.
Sure it does. That's the beauty of it.
That's the beauty
things like
of it if you're
healthcare
an NFL owner.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, I mean, in terms of negotiations between the Players Association and the NFL. Just so everybody knows, those things are governed by federal law because it is a union negotiating with ownership, and so there's a whole lot of Clayton Act and a whole bunch of other things that govern negotiations between unions and ownership. So it's a lot more of a specific process than people may realize, because there's been a ton of litigation going back a century over negotiations between unions and owners. So it's not just kind of a willy-nilly thing, just so everybody knows.
No, of course not. I'm sure there's all kinds of letter of the law stuff that applies.
Yeah, there are.
Well, I don't know. I just think it's interesting to put through a few more numbers out there. The minimum salary for rookies in the NFL is about $435,000. That's pretty close to baseball, which is like $415,000. Right. It's just interesting to think that those two sports are on par with their starting salaries. 10-year veterans in the NBA receive about $1.5 million guaranteed. In the NFL, it's only $970,000. So significantly
and there's
lower.
also not nearly as many 10-year veterans in the NFL
That's true.
as the NBA.
That's true as well.
See, the baseball comparison is interesting because most of the 22-year-olds baseball players are playing in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
And the minor league players are almost at the poverty line. They're making like $20,000-$30,000 a year in some cases, whereas a 22-year-old football player is going to be in the NFL.
That's true.
Yeah. So it's by the time a baseball player gets to the major leagues and is making the league minimum, say he's a 30th round draft pick, he worked hard, he's going to be a middle reliever in Major League Baseball. He's done 5 or 6 years in the minors. Now he's 28, and now he's going to make the league minimum. So there's a difference in the money there for baseball players. It's not everybody can be A-Rod.
Aren't these kids in baseball getting drafted at like 16, 17 years old though?
Well, you can get drafted they get drafted out of high school, but some of them decline to go into Major League Baseball and they go to college instead. Right. And Major League Baseball has a rule that if you don't sign with your club when you're drafted out of high school and you choose to go to college, you have to stay in college for 3 years before you can get drafted again. So what typically happens is the guys at the top of the Major League Baseball draft, the first 2 or 3 rounds, usually all sign with the clubs, right? Because the bonuses are so big. They're getting $1 million bonuses. They can't turn it down. But then you get into like the 15th round and below. There's like 50 rounds in the Major League Baseball draft. A lot of those guys go play in college.
Yeah.
A lot of them do.
The Major League Baseball. That's why the Major League Baseball draft isn't that interesting to watch, because
50 rounds.
You've got 50,
I watch
60
it, but
rounds.
I'm a baseball fan.
Yeah. After the first round, odds are most of those guys you're not going to hear from in 8 years anyway.
Yeah. All my point is, I think it's to compare a 22-year-old baseball player to a 22-year-old football player. A lot of times is not the
it's
same.
apples and oranges. I think one of the reasons we talked earlier, briefly touched on this about the television deals. I really only follow the National Football League. The reason that I follow the National Football League is because it's very easy for me as a consumer of that product to schedule my time around Sundays for the most part.
Sure.
For part of the year, it's very, very difficult for me to follow basketball, to follow hockey, to follow baseball, where the games are sporadically all over the place. I think that the NFL just kind of hit a gold mine in terms of laying out from the very beginning a very consumer-friendly approach to displaying their product.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's why they're able to have a national TV deal that works so well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, true.
All right, let's beep this and move on to something else. What do you got for us, Sean?
Well, so we got a couple little things, and by the way, we should make a whole episode about contracts. That was fun.
I think we just did.
I'd love to talk about contracts all day long. I would.
Like Steve wakes up in a cold sweat hoping that we do that. Well, the other stuff that happened...
I can just talk. You might not get a word in it.
Right. The other stuff that happened this week in Redskins world is beat reporter Chris Russell is out at ESPN 980 after 5 years. So for those of you who don't know Chris Russell, he was there for the launch of 106.7 The Fan as we know it, which was in 2009. I think he was there for a year, and then he graduated on to ESPN, where he spent the last 5 as a beat reporter. So his contract was not renewed. But I don't know. What are our thoughts on Chris Russell and his career here?
He definitely lost an edge when he moved over to 980. I think anyone who listens to local sports, which I know it's hard for Kelly and Steve, anyone who listens kind of knows that when he was on 106.7, he was kind of gloves off with the team. And that stopped as soon as he started getting the old Dan Snyder paycheck.
Yeah. You know what's funny about 980 is if you look at the tweets that have gone out in the wake of his his contract not being renewed, they're hilarious. They're like, wow, man, can't believe you made it 5 years in that environment. Wow, major respect for making it 5 years over a 980. Hilarious. Chris Russell, to me, the thing that sticks out is when he said he would quit his job if Deshaun Jackson signed with the Redskins. He kind of has a history of strongly and confidently asserting something that does not end up being true.
Yeah. Bill Cowher is going to be the next head coach.
Right. Another one.
I listen to more local talk radio than you might suspect, actually, even though I'm not there anymore. I've always found Chris Russell to be petty and obnoxious. I don't like his style. I'm not going to miss him. I wish him the best of luck. I hate to see somebody lose their job, but, I think sports talk in D.C. will be better off without him.
He's better at writing than he was spoken. I always felt like.
There's some of these guys in the media who, they try to, it all goes back to the days when radio changed from, being about music and stuff to being about, whether it was Howard Stern or the Grease Man. You just kind of get these guys, and then that carried over into the political realm with guys like Lydia and Limbaugh, and and now on the liberal side, they've got their share as well of sort of these blowhards that just try to make the biggest splash, right? Because it's all about the biggest splash. And I think that Chris Russell, he wants to be one of those guys. I'm going to say something that's so far out on the edge that everybody's going to listen to me, and I'm going to get more likes and more retweets and blah, 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 because I'm the big controversial guy. And people just don't care about that shit anymore.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I feel like with this team, and maybe it's a sports thing in general, no one wants to be a beat reporter. They all want to be a columnist.
Right.
And people have looked at DC and said, well, what is the model that has worked in DC the most for going from that jump? And it's kind of what Mike Wise did. It's what Wilbon did. Say something controversial. Say something that's going to offend the local populace a little bit, and get your name out there.
Get your name out there.
See, I'd rather have him say something intelligent than something that's designed to be intentionally controversial but is idiotic. I.e., the team is going to hire Bill Cowher.
Right.
I think Chris Russell was the only one in America that ever honestly believed that. And it was just designed to get attention.
Well, it would have been nice if we had, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I don't know. We've been down that road. Mike Shanahan and everything else. Who knows?
We need an owner.
Well,
let's not relive that.
I'm more of a fan of the whole ground and pound thing that Cowher does, but yeah.
I love the ground and pound. Well, I didn't mean that euphemistically.
I also meant it euphemistically. But
I know you did. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. Aside from that, thanks for that, guys. We had a couple other smaller stories that we can mention. I know we wanted to get to talk about inside linebackers today, but other stuff that came out this week, obviously the supplemental draft. That's the big news in the NFL. That's going to be July 9th, so about 5 days here. And there are about 7 eligible players, I think, that have been announced. Do we know anything about these guys?
There is one real candidate this year who apparently is a good enough football player to get drafted, Isaiah Battle, who's an offensive tackle from Clemson. I don't know his story. If everybody doesn't know what the supplemental draft is all about, the way people get into the supplemental draft is that if they were not eligible to be drafted when the NFL draft began, but their eligibility has since changed, they can be drafted in the supplemental draft. That's why
usually has to do with suspensions and weird things like that, right?
Usually it's guys who got in trouble for the most part.
Yeah.
And how it works is that the team that drafts Mr. Battle will lose a draft pick from next year. So if they draft him in the 4th round, they'll lose their 4th rounder from next year. It's not televised, right? The NFL does this via email. Is how it's done.
Right,
by the
you
way.
send in your bid.
So that's what it is. All these guys had some issue going on. But my question would be, is this guy worth taking a chance on? Do we need another offensive tackle?
So, Steve, I was wondering if you could help clarify something for me. So you mentioned that, if we take somebody takes Battle, for example, in the 4th round of the supplemental draft, they would then not have their 4th round pick in 2016. So I'm assuming that this means that, we don't have to take players in every round, right? You can just, decide he's not worth the 1st round, so I'm not going to pick anybody in the 1st. He's not worth the 2nd round. I'm not going to pick anybody. And then when you feel like it's time to jump in and take a guy, you would take him. And then the risk is that if you don't jump in early enough, you might lose that guy to some other team.
Yeah, it's actually even more than that because how it worked, they do it via email, as I said. And so the NFL will say, okay, it's round 1, and then everybody sends an email in. If you want the guy, they'll say, Redskins draft Isaiah Battle round 1. But if there's 3 teams that want him in round 1, the highest pick will get him.
And that's the same highest
and then
pick
once
that
round,
we just had in the it's the same order.
Yeah,
as
it's the
regular.
same order. Same order. And so then they'll move on to round 2. They'll do the same thing, round 3, round 4, round 5. We're going to hear about there won't be any television or anything. We're going to hear about it on like Twitter,
right,
or something like that. That's about all the coverage it gets. So I think what the team will do is they'll say, Isaiah Battle we think is worth I'm just throw it out of thin air, 5th round pick.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's where we have him pegged, the team will use a 5th round pick on him.
Nice.
And if they get him, they get him.
That'd be
If they don't, they
compelling
don't.
television, though. Watching the guy sit there wait for emails to come in. That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah,
what do you got, Sean?
I was just going to ask, do we know how often is it unprecedented for players to just not get selected in the supplemental draft at all?
Oh yeah, all the time.
It happens every year. It's more often than not.
Because you're gambling your future picks away. Now I do know that the last time I think someone did it was Josh Gordon. I think right. He was a supplemental pick.
Josh Gordon.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. And we did. Was it Jarvis Jenkins or Jeremy Jarman?
Jenkins. No, it was
Jarman.
Jarman.
I never knew
Yeah.
that's where he came from.
Yeah, we 3rd round draft pick in the supplemental.
And that's high. Third
It was
third
Jarman.
round draft. Best supplemental
Yeah, I don't think I've ever
pick.
seen one go higher than the 3rd round before.
Hey, you know what? Chris Carter was a supplemental draft pick. He's in the Hall of Fame.
You know who else was a supplemental draft pick? Was Gary Clark. We made out really good after the USFL collapsed.
Yeah, we did.
You made out with Gary Clark?
I made out with Gary Clark after the USFL. He was in a very vulnerable position. He was sad. He just lost his job. His whole league had collapsed, and he was kind of a cute guy. To be honest with you, Jesus Christ, I didn't make out with Gary Clark.
You heard it here
That's
first.
just what you said.
USFL #1 reason never to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the supplemental draft is just a measure of, how good they think this guy is versus the value of the future pick.
Yeah.
That's why I think probably 90% of them, if not more, don't get picked.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see. I heard a couple people saying he could be a good pick for the Giants. I know they were looking for offensive line help too.
Well, right now they're using guys who really shouldn't even be in the NFL. So
yeah,
that sounds familiar.
It really does. Well, moving on from that, the only other headline we wanted to mention today were the 4 player suspensions that were announced late this past week, I think Thursday maybe or Friday, but it's Antonio Gates, Rolando McClain, Sheldon Richardson, and Datone, I think I'm saying that right, Jones of the Packers. Gates, PEDs, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Gates was PED. Gates was performing. Let me back up. Gates' suspension came under the performance-enhancing drug policy. What Gates claimed it was that he took some supplements and used some holistic remedies to recover from an injury, and one of those products had a banned substance in it. The reason why we should have no sympathy for Antonio Gates is that the NFLPA and the NFL and all the major leagues, there's a symbol that goes on the products. If you go into GNC and you look, there's a symbol that indicates it's approved, okay? And so if you don't deviate from the products that are pre-approved, you will be okay. If you start to get into a bunch of weird things, then you're running the risk that something that's like the 20th ingredient is going to be banned.
Yeah, absolutely. And this happens all
so that's
the time,
what happened
right?
to Gates.
I had no idea that the unknown substance I was putting into my body because someone told me to may not have been the right thing. So you're responsible for what you ingest, and that's comes down to that.
Yeah, that's right. The military, I was in the military for a bunch of years, and the military has drug tests, and they always said the same thing. And I always told people, if you just stick to the products in GNC that have the approved symbol on them, you will be fine with the military and you'll be fine with the NFL.
Buy from the PX.
Don't deviate. No, well, you can get in trouble with GNC, actually. You can buy stuff in the GNC that'll get popped positive.
Yeah,
on
no,
every
half
drug
that
test.
crap is, you shouldn't be putting most of that in your body anyway. What do you got, Sean?
I was just gonna say, so it's only for the first 4 games anyway. It's not a big suspension. The same is true of Rolando McClain. It was also substance abuse. He's of the Cowboys, obviously. He's gonna be gone for the first 4 weeks of the season. The other 2 guys, I don't know.
You want me to give a little insight into what's going on here real fast? Richardson and McLean popped positive on a marijuana test. Now, because they have a 4-game suspension, that means they had previously popped positive on another test, and they are now in phase 2 of the substance abuse program. Okay, Gates was on the performance-enhancing drug policy, which is a totally other program. So Richardson and Ronaldo McLean flunked the stupid test because they already flunked once and they flunked again. Dante Jones, he got cited for.
It's Dayton. Dayton Jones.
Dayton. Okay. Dayton Jones got cited for possession of marijuana and did not fail the drug test. So, he got a 1-game suspension. It's probably under the personal conduct policy rather than the drug policy because he did not. That would have been a second failure, which would have been a 4-game suspension if he'd already popped positive once. So Richardson, McLean, dummies, Gates probably guessed wrong on a product. Dante Jones got picked up with some marijuana by the cops. That's what happened.
And Steve, as I understand, you're a big marijuana enthusiast. Is that correct?
No, I think it's a scourge of society, basically, and I'm not kidding.
Oh, poor Steve. We give Steve a hard time because he actually lives his life the way that people are supposed to. And he does the right thing. He plays by the rules. He's a good guy. He's a solid guy. But the rest of us aren't. We're basically degenerates, and therefore, unfortunately, Steve's in the minority.
Yeah.
Amongst
I love you guys anyway.
Sludge that the rest of us.
It's all right.
I love you guys anyway, and it's important to remember though, no matter what all 4 of us think, I think you 3 think differently than I do about it. But the simple fact of the matter is, the NFL has a very open and obvious policy. Everybody knows about it, and if you fail and you choose to disregard the policy, no sympathy will be coming your way from me. It's as simple as that.
Oh, absolutely. No, the rules are very clear, and people.
Even
people
though
are
I
breaking
think
the
it's a
rules.
stupid policy, I think you can make generation-changing money. So deal with it.
Right. Put the weed down and make your millions.
I think that the rules are going to evolve over time. I think that this is another thing where society's views on marijuana are changing for the most part. It's not going to change for some people, but on the whole, you're starting to see more and more places legalize marijuana, and at some point, the NFL will change. I think it started to change it a little bit, or at least started to talk about its pot policy. But that's probably a discussion for. We could do a whole segment on pot. In fact, we should probably go ahead and get baked at some point and do an entire episode on pot in 2 ways.
Oh yeah, I'm fucked up right now.
I'm actually not drinking for our show, which is a nice little change.
I'm not either because it's the ass crack at dawn over here on the West Coast, and I like it more when you guys are doing this at 11 o'clock and Robbie's half asleep, and and it's it's the middle of the afternoon for me, and I'm loving it.
Nice.
All right. Well, we were gonna chat about inside linebackers, so maybe we should do a little bit of that so we can actually get some Redskins news into this cast. So
July news.
Let's. I know, Steve, you've got some numbers for us. Let's talk about the situation. Obviously, we drafted a couple in this past draft, and it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out when the season starts.
The Redskins position group breakdown.
Okay, inside linebackers. Our starting inside linebackers, obviously, Keenan Robinson, Perry Riley. Keenan Robinson going into his 4th year, 6'3", 238. He obviously did not play very much at all before last season.
Right.
He's had a pectoral tear on both the left and the right side separately. I don't think any of us really thought that Keenan Robinson would develop into the solid player that he had so quickly. At least I didn't.
It's a surprise.
He had He's had 120 tackles in his career. The huge bulk of that were last year. That's a pretty solid level of production for a first-year starter, 109 tackles. He plays the Mike linebacker position, which means he's the play caller. And if everybody remembers, that was a big controversy last year, too. Most of us thought Perry Riley was going to end up following in the footsteps of London Fletcher, and he didn't.
Right. Well, seniority and all.
Yeah, exactly. And Robinson is one of these freak of nature athlete guys. He has a 36-inch vertical leap. He ran a 4.5 40 in high school. A little slower now because he's bigger. 27 bench press reps. That's pretty good for a linebacker. Perry Riley, as we know, is on his second contract with the Redskins, 2010 draft pick from LSU. Personally, I think he's more of an average player than is Robinson. I don't know what you guys think about him.
Yeah.
He's had 240
on that for sure. Yeah, Perry Riley. He's a good player. He's one of these guys. I see him as a Reed Doughty type. He's a guy that you can put in there and he can get the job done at a basic level. He's not going to blow anybody up. He's not London Fletcher. He's not going to change the game for you. But he's also usually not the guy who's going to lose the game for you. But my big feeling about the inside linebacker position, particularly last year, and I realize we've made a lot of changes. We've made changes at safety. We've changed all the coaches basically. But really, those guys were getting abused up the middle by tight ends.
Yeah.
We had an awful hard time covering people, and that. To me, I felt like we did a good job against the run game, and I think that both of those guys played very well against the run. But when it's coming to coverage, something's got to change. I'm glad that the safeties changed, but I don't know how much of that was on the safeties, how much of it was on the inside linebackers, and how much of it was on the staff.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, none of us really know what the assignments are all the time. We've had Robbie say that a bunch of times when it comes to other position breakdowns. Without seeing, we can't really tell what the assignments are for these players. At the same time, I'm with you. Yeah, obviously we can't seem to cover tight ends, and I've sometimes wondered if maybe that's just casualty of running a 3-4 versus 4-3. You don't have anybody who naturally lines up against a tight end because linebackers really, they're too far inside. If the tight end breaks outside, they're screwed.
Yeah. Agree, and also, insofar as not knowing assignments, that's true, but there were a couple times, I don't know if you guys noticed this, that like a linebacker would try to pass off somebody to the second level into the secondary, like they would say, okay, I've come to the end of my zone, basically, I'm trying to pass him off to a safety or corner or whatever, and nobody was there. So I think that is on staff, so I think, it's a shared, the failures are a shared responsibility amongst all three. But anyways, in terms of Perry Riley, he's on a pretty big deal. He's on like a 3-year, $13 million deal, which is kind of a lot to give to a guy who struggles in coverage, but is good against the run and kind of is an average player, right?
Well, I think the contract is more average than you realize, actually, for a starting 3-4 inside linebacker. First of all, it's a $12 million contract, not 13, and it goes through 2016. So after next season, he's going to be a free agent. But remember back to when he became a free agent, he didn't get really any offers at all.
Right.
And he came back to us on a much smaller contract than any of us thought. And remember, listen, he's the jack backer, not the Mike backer. And so I wish we had Robbie here, for this, but. I think he's more the line of scrimmage guy, which makes me wonder if Keenan Robinson is the one who may be more at fault for the coverage blows than anything.
Tough to say. His tackles were so much higher than everybody
Yeah,
else's.
well, and Riley's got 9.5 sacks in his career. He's definitely rushed the passer more than Robinson is ever going to do scheme-wise.
Yeah.
I think,
Kelly?
Well, we were talking a little bit about the possibility of it being a 3-4 versus 4-3 thing, and my understanding, my limited football knowledge, when you have a 3-4, you've got two guys who potentially in the middle are available to drop back. You have more pass coverers people in a 3-4 than you have in a 4-3. The advantage to a 4-3 in terms of stopping the tight end from burning you is that you generally are going to have a defensive end, depending on how you shift that D line. If you're shifting strong side versus weak side, you're going to have a body who's lining up basically helmet to helmet against the tight end, and what you're doing at that point is stopping him from getting a good release, stopping him from getting out, getting out clean, and then hopefully you're getting some pressure on the quarterback before that route's established. We didn't have that last year in the 3-4. We're probably not going to have it this year in the 3-4. You have an outside linebacker who's really not looking to initiate contact with the tight end, but who is generally either going to be dropping back into coverage or trying to get upfield and get to the quarterback. And that's not the case when you have a D end who's lining up there. So it really in the 3-4, you're looking for those inside linebackers to be able to pick up the tight end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you actually kind of just stole my point I was going to make there about the fact that it's all right. Our linebackers basically seem to have one job, at least in the old defense. We don't know about the new defense so much. But in the old defense, it seems like the whole point of that defense was you rush with those outside linebackers on almost every play.
I mean, remember the basic concept of the 2-gap 3-4 is that the three defensive linemen will occupy space and occupy blockers, and then the linebackers who are rushing the passer will pick the gap that is free as a result of the front three holding their blocks. Now, when you go to a 1-gap 3-4 system, all 7 of them are in a much more attacking mode. They hit their gap, and whatever happens.
Right.
So I think it is going to be a completely different feel. We've been hearing for years now, courtesy of Jim Haslett, it's going to be a more attacking defense, and it's kind of, blah, 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 whatever, Jim.
Unleashed.
This year it might actually happen if we really go to a 1-gap system.
Well, and one more thought about linebackers. We haven't mentioned our, key backup guy yet, Compton.
Yep. Or our
I was about to get to Compton. Compton, 6'1", 230, from Nebraska, undrafted free agent 2013. This is a guy that Robbie Duncan, our very own Mr. Duncan, X's and O's guy, really likes Compton. So I think he's a guy to watch out for. He had a couple starts last season in place of Riley, who was injured. So I think the team may be looking at him more as a jack backer than anything. But anyway, so I think he's someone to look out for. Adam Hayward was the other backup. He got hurt last year, and he's a special teams captain. But I think he was basically listed as the primary backup until such time as he got hurt. He's been around for a while. He's with Tampa 7 years, drafted in 2007, periodic starter. He's like a 20 to 30 tackle a year type guy, typically. So there's that. And then our draft pick was Martrell Spate. I think he may be. I think we decided when we did our post-draft review that he's probably going to be a special teams depth guy more than anything.
Yeah, you have to realize that inside linebackers, generally, your depth guys have to be good on special teams.
Yeah.
Special teams seems to be mostly made up of tight ends and linebackers at one spot or another.
Yeah,
they got the right build for it. Yeah, that's a combination of size and speed.
Right.
I think that Compton really showed himself really well. I think last year,
speed,
in the opportunities that he had on the field, I really felt like he stepped up. He made some solid plays. He seemed to take good angles. He's not the guy that we had an awful lot of blown coverages, blown calls. What we didn't have last year, which was a very nice change from the year prior, we didn't have a whole heck of a lot of missed tackles. It seemed that our tackling really improved last year. And I'd like to see that carry forward, even though we have largely new players and basically an entire new defense. But the tackling from the inside linebacker spot and everybody else seemed to be going very, very, very well.
We also have a few other guys in here which maybe camp fodder types. Dyshawn Davis, rookie from Syracuse, signed him as an undrafted free agent, 6'2", 227. Jagara Davis, another Davis, second-year player from LSU. I'm sorry, SMU, not LSU. We have Alonzo Highsmith, who has actually been around the league a little bit. He was with the Dolphins for a while. He's with Kansas City for a while. He's 6', 240. And then we have Trevardo Williams, 6'1", 237 from Connecticut. He has bounced around a lot in a short period of time. He was with the Colts. He was with Houston. He was a draft pick by Houston, and then he was with our practice squad at the end of last year.
Yeah, the name's familiar.
And our active roster. Yeah, he was with our active roster at the very tail end of the year. So those are kind of our camp fodder guys. Whether or not any of them make the team, remains to be seen.
Sure.
In summary, kind of, the linebacker position group breakdown here. Robinson, Riley are our starters. Established starters. Will Compton is established backup. Adam Hayward, if he stays healthy, and then Martrell Spate is probably special teams guy, and then we have our 3 camp fodder guys.
I think I thought I heard that Trevardo guy was pretty good.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. I have nothing to base it on. I think I heard that somewhere.
Well,
I like his name.
These are old guys, like you said, they're going to be camp fodder, or if they want to make the team, they got to beat out Hayward or somebody else on the special teams front. That's what it all comes down to.
Yeah.
I think the team likes Hayward a lot. They made him a special teams captain. He's a beast on special teams. I don't think anybody's
nobody's going to beat out Hayward on special teams. He's looking like he's got the potential to be the next kind of Lorenzo Alexander type guy for us.
Well, he's a little up there in age at this point, but I'm with you that we need that. We lost that when we lost Alexander and Dowdy, and if you notice, that's when our special teams really started to collapse.
Yeah,
our special teams.
This may be one of those position groups that there's not a lot of room for the young guys to break in, because it seems like all 5 of the top guys are pretty established.
Yeah, I would agree, though. That said, it seems to me, if you take a step back and look at the full team, inside linebacker seems like one of the positions over the years that we've kind of not focused on as much as, certainly when you look at it compared to outside linebacker, and then now this year with the secondary, inside linebacker was like the one defensive position we didn't really mess around with too much.
Well, we had London Fletcher for 6-7 years,
and we got Hayward, whatever the year before. But I still think it's one of our weaker defensive positions, and that's.
Oh, I agree, and I think if you go forward 2 years, I think. Perry Riley's got a long road to hoe in order to get another contract from us.
I agree.
I think we're okay. We have a lot of depth. We don't have any studs starting.
That's what I'm
That's
trying
where
to say.
we are.
Right.
Yeah.
Keenan Robinson may be a stud.
He may be, but he's got a ways to go to prove it.
Yeah, I agree. I think
certainly the best one of the bunch.
I think when we're talking about inside linebackers at this point, I really do think that we need to give a shout out to London Fletcher. The guy, we picked him up in 2007, I think, and
sounds right.
I don't think that anybody expected this guy to be playing for more than 2-3 years tops. He ended up playing for 6 years for us at a high level. Well, he played 5 years at a high level, and then he played a 6-year.
Right.
He was, but he was still a good player. I tease him a little bit because
he was a good team leader even when he didn't have it.
He was an incredible team leader. He was, and just a solid guy, just a good man. So I just appreciate everything he brought to the team.
I agree too. CBS just ran a story saying that he was one of the 3 Redskins that could still play today. They must have not been paying much attention to that last year, but he still was better than the average guy. And the other guys that made the go ahead.
Were they including the people who are currently on the roster in that list?
Right. I was wondering if someone was going to ask that question.
I was just going to say the thing about London Fletcher that I love so much is. People were really upset that we lost, was it Antonio Pierce at the time, who was our middle linebacker before him? And everyone was outraged that we lost him to the Giants. Then we got Fletcher, and let's be honest, Fletcher outplayed Pierce those 4 years or so that Pierce was still in the NFL. So, I appreciate that little aspect that even though we lost out on a guy, we won in the end.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just, we all loved London Fletcher when he was with the team, probably too much. I didn't really appreciate the comments he made about the team.
Yeah, that was harsh.
Last year when I thought he
ripped Haslett.
He made some pretty classless, tacky remarks about Jim Haslett. It was totally uncalled for, and I lost some respect for London Fletcher as a result.
But it was so fun.
I can't complain too much if somebody's going to rip Jim Haslett because he deserves everything he gets. But.
Yeah, but be classy in public always.
Yeah, I agree with that.
To those people who don't know the quote, I believe it was Jim Haslett could take the '85 Bears and make them look like a high school defense.
Yeah.
Pretty harsh stuff, but probably.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
and he
he
went
also
on to
said
say-
Jim Haslett basically throws somebody under the bus every year he's with a team.
Yeah.
Well, that, and he also said that he, Fletcher, would change Hazlett's play calls because Hazlett's calls made no sense. If that may be true, but it's not. Just doesn't need to be said. I just
you
don't
know
like
what?
that
The
kind of
last 2
thing, and
years
I
that
don't-
he was working with Haslett, the play calling made no sense. So maybe Fletcher should keep quiet on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Hazlett's calls would have been more effective than we don't have any way of knowing. But I agree with Steve 100%. Everybody's had a boss that they don't like. You don't go and publicly rip that guy after you're done working there.
Though
And then go back and
and that
forth
goes
with
for
his kid
Jay
on Twitter.
Gruden too.
I did love his response to that, though. Someone was like, "Why would you go out there and try to ruin Hazlett's career?" And he was like, "Oh, Hazlett's ruined plenty of careers." I love that quote.
He was an angry
London
man.
Fletcher and Jay Gruden need to learn the same lesson.
Yeah.
It's a different lesson because Jay Gruden, and I think you and I have probably been through this before as well. Steve and I are just on opposite sides of everything today. Jay Gruden, he was publicly ripping one of his players, and that is a tactic that is used by coaches as a motivational tool. Might not be one you agree with, may or may not have been effective, but I think that it's within Gruden's rights to utilize whatever tools are at his disposal to try to get his player to play better. London Fletcher going after Haslett, completely different situation.
Just means
Especially
I thought
after
it was-
the fact, it's sour grapes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't like. I don't want to get into the Gruden thing. We don't need to argue about
Yeah.
that today. I didn't like it.
We've
I
argued
still
about
don't
enough
like it.
today.
Yeah.
Well, anybody have a concluding thought or two on inside linebackers, or?
I do. I hope that all of our inside linebackers have a fantastic 4th of July.
Oh, how nice!
Because I'm sweet like that in a patriotic way.
What a sweetheart.
Sean, did you want to tell us anything about your trip to Denver and the Denver Stadium?
Maybe we could save it for next time, other than to say, it was just... So, for folks who don't know, I took a trip to Colorado. One thing we definitely made sure to do was to stop by Mile High Stadium. I have always complained about FedEx Field, and it was just awesome to see a real stadium. I mean, all kinds of cool art in the plaza around the stadium, all kinds of Colorado history art. There's a Colorado Sports History Museum in the stadium. It's this cool, asymmetrical, beautiful kind of shape. A gorgeous stadium, truly. I went down to the field. I ran out the tunnel that the visiting teams run out. It was really cool. I mean, it's just a really well done stadium. I had a great time. We toured everything from the field to like the reporter room where everybody sits, to tons of different like boxes that you can rent out for like $15,000 a game. You can go in there and like bring a whole party in there. It was a really nice stadium. It was really cool. It was actually funny. They had some water main damage that wrecked a whole section of seats. But other than that, it was literally like everything about it was just so much painfully cooler than FedEx Field. So much painfully cooler.
But did they have good hot dogs? That's all that I really.
The
care
hot
about.
dogs, unfortunately, weren't part of the tour. I probably had to spend like an extra $8 if I wanted to get a hot dog. But I'm sure, they were probably on par. Sushi, yeah. They had a sushi, right. They have sushi in Mile High Stadium and 5-star restaurants. It's a beautiful place. Anyways, that's the Hog Stye for today. We'll come back with you next week with more on Denver and other stuff. But we'll call it there today. Hopefully you can get with us on our social medias accounts. Facebook at facebook.com/hailtothehogs, on Twitter at the Hogstye. Reach us online on our own website at www.thehogstye.com, and make sure you send us a damn email with a question or feedback or something that you want to see on the air. So send us an email. It's thehogstye@gmail.com, and we'll see you next time.
I had no idea we were going to get into the social philosophy section today.